Welcome to ZealZaddy, everybody. And, oh, God, I'm already rusty this year. Welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time enjoying Story Talk. The holidays gave me time to refresh the show a little bit and prepare for 2024. I'm Scott, my pronouns are he, him, and this is ZealZaddy. You can follow us everywhere at ZealZaddy or at ZealZaddy RPG on TikTok. I think my camera's a little off-center. It's driving me crazy. You can check out our D&D and Cypher SYstem products on DriveThruRPG. Just look up ZealZaddy, you'll find them there. You can use the clip command, which is exclamation point clip, to save a particular clip. I hope you do it because I love to see them and I reuse them as part of the intermission, next week's intermission. For my YouTube viewers, when this drops on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I do respond to every comment. And if you have a question you want to drop in chat, just put the word question right before it to make it easy for me to find. Sometimes the chat can get a little busy. Sometimes it gets hard to kind of scroll through it while I'm thinking and doing the other stuff. Let's see. All right, at intermission. So for those who know us, we've been running Old Gods of Appalachia the last month and a half or 2 months. Actually, it's 3 months. Wow. So I have some clips in the intermission you can check out while we're taking a few minutes break in the midpoint. Let's just bring everybody on and get this thing started. I'm super excited to start 2024. All right, so we have 3 amazing guests tonight. Why don't we start with Rachel, and we'll go clockwise from there.
Hello, my name is Rachel. I'm she, her. You can find me at Stolen Fires, pretty much everywhere on the internet. Even if I don't post, I camp the name so nobody else could take it. Mostly I'm on Blue Sky and Twitch nowadays, though. I have a itty bitty tabletop Twitch channel, also over at Stolen Fires. Currently, we are running, let's see, our Fringe-worthy game is on hiatus, but we are running a Dune game. It's a lot of fun. And I have previously run a Blade Runner game there. And as soon as the Replicant Underground book comes out from Free League, we're going to do season 2.
Awesome. All right, Dusty.
Hi, I'm Dustin. I use they, he pronouns, and I am GM and producer of An Unwavering Force, which is a Star Wars story using Pathfinder 2E. I'm also cast and producer of Goblets and Gays. Our Pathfinder 2E main campaign is finished. Last episode, season 4 came out, but currently we're doing an alien series called Mother May I, season 2. If you haven't listened to the first series, you should check it out. This season is more bonkers than has ever been before. Yeah, just definitely check them both out.
All right, Al.
How's it going, everyone? I'm Al Spader, GM_Admiral on all the socials. I'm a contributing writer for the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game. I'm also the creator of the Sentience 2D20 role-playing game. I run an ongoing Star Trek campaign over on Wanderer's Haven, the Twitch channel, called Star Trek Forefront. We just finished our first season last weekend, and my pronouns are he, him.
All right. So tonight's topic is GMing mainstream sci-fi. So Star Trek, Dune, Star Wars, The Expanse, any of those kinds of shows. Now, this is as opposed to, say, running Traveler or Esper Genesis or something that is basically I don't want to say a homebrewed world, but a world that doesn't have the cultural cachet walking in that some of these others do have. So I'm going to get right into questions. If you have questions, drop them in chat. Please clip things as you find answers that you find interesting or exciting. So I'm going to start with the most basic question and the premise of the whole show, which is why choose a licensed system setting to run, as opposed to one like, and here's some of the ones that I know of that a lot of people in chat would probably know. There's, of course, Esper Genesis, Traveler, Blue Planet, Change Stars, Stars Without Number, Coriolis, Shadowrun, Rifts, Numenera. All of those are not the licensed stuff. So why choose the licensed one? The world that has already got that cultural cachet. And I'll let you all answer in whatever order you feel the most comfortable. If you have some ready to go, you can hop in. or I'll
I,
point to people.
for me, it's two different reasons. So part of the reason that I wanted to run my Blade Runner game is because Blade Runner is one of my favorite films. It's top three. And so just to be able to, get elbows deep in this setting and play with it a little bit more, uh, that's what I wanted to do, and that's why I wanted to run the campaign. And then also, it's really easy. So if I go to my friend and I'm like, hey, I want to run a Blade Runner campaign, they already know what it's going to be about mostly. It's going to be about replicants and what makes a person, and is there any, the nature of personhood and humanity as told through this particular setting. And, it's a lot easier to say, like, hey, I want to run a Blade Runner campaign than to be like, so I have this idea that I want to run in Starfinder about like, blurring the lines between robots and people on, like, a kind of post-apocalyptic, but not really kind of Earth. Like, does that sound cool for you? I just say Blade Runner. They know exactly what I mean.
Yeah, I would say it's about two things, right? It's about tone and about expectations, right? When you set forth that you're going to run a game with an IP, generally the people who come together for that understand what the general tone and the general expectations are going to be, and it makes your session zero go a lot more smoothly. Whereas if you're using an open system, there are lots of different directions that people can go, and they may wish to go in different directions and have different experiences, and that can still happen in IPs that are out there, but for the most part, generally the tone and the expectation, you know what you're getting yourself into.
Wait, what do you mean this alien campaign is going to be super lethal?
Oh, I'm laughing for no reason whatsoever. I yeah, exactly what y'all said. I also what I love about like running games and set systems, you have all this like history, like all this like I run the Star Wars game. There is nearly 50 years of Star Wars history to do. But what I want to get into is the stuff that just like hasn't been explored really. Like I want to tell like go in it's like, okay, we have this, we have lightsabers and stuff. Dope. But what about like the stuff that they don't talk about? Let's dig in there. Let's unveil, let's like rewrite history. What are midichlorians? No one cares. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like getting your chance to put your own little canon into the IP is really, really a cool feeling as well. So I
Hmm.
agree with you 100% there, Dusty. Spot on.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like. And some people write fan fiction. Some people do TTRPGs. What's TTRPGs except like playable fan fiction?
I'm
It's
not
a
sure there's a
sentence.
difference, to be honest. Fan fiction, you know,
So fair.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not a game I run, but on my channel I play in our Dune game. And we've just completely rewritten uh the canon. My character has stolen most of Lady Jessica's narrative beats. We have our own Mahdi. Stilgar's already anointed him and everything.
Right.
Mhm, mhm.
So when you're since role playing is really at the heart of TTRPGs, do you feel that the collective knowledge of the setting, I mean, that the players have, helps players with their performance? Like, does it make it easier for them to perform or do the improv or acting?
I'd say yes and no. From my experience, I like having a couple people in the cast who know the setting, who love the setting, who are really familiar with the setting. But then it's also really fun to have a ringer or two. It's like, oh yeah, no, I've never seen the Blade Runner movies. What do you mean he's a robot?
Honestly, exactly that. That's like unwavering. One of our castmates' only knowledge of Star Wars is like 3 episodes of The Mandalorian. That has changed since. But it's like some people that get in the mindset of like the setting, like know like exactly what kind of character they need to play. I think it does really help them because they have a baseline like just for instance, Jedi is supposed to act like X, Y, or Z. I could pull like Y as like story beats. Are the other character who has like no like knowledge or care for any canon or like non-canon whatsoever, is just going in and making their own story, and like both could exist beautifully in like the same game.
Yeah, and I think that like people who know the IP and know the canon well can sometimes go the other direction, right? They can kind of be almost like gatekeepery about it, saying, "Well, that can't happen because of this. This
Hmm.
happened on that episode." So that's something that should also be covered in in the session zero, right? How are we taking canon as a Bible? Or are we going to be flexible with what we want to do and tell the story we want to tell, regardless of what canon's already out there? So you just have to like, I wouldn't say it's harder to do, but I think it does require planning and knowing your player's experience with the IP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I honestly, like, if you think about it, like the game you're playing isn't canon anyways, so you don't have to like necessarily stick to a quote unquote Bible.
Well, around that, I mean, even beyond players, what about things like locations? How much do you run the locations people know versus world building your own around the periphery of what's known in the setting? Like, this is really about how much do you world build as opposed to just work with the setting as written.
So for Blade Runner, I didn't have to world build like at all because the game is very narrow. You are playing members of Rep Detect attached to the LAPD. It's in Los Angeles. It comes with a really nice map.
Right.
Uh, and I live in Los Angeles, so it's very easy for me to be like, oh, the Sepulveda seawall? Wow, that's like 2 blocks away.
uh for unwavering, I didn't do as much like world building outside of like the known planets. I basically just like modified or expanded known planets. Like I think we spent like the first 5 episodes in Coruscant. um we've added so much in there, but Coruscant is like a planet made of like thousands of city levels. You could do whatever you want in that planet. And I've just kind of been adding on to there, playing around like with known landmarks and known history with the landmarks, but also just kind of building up upon that.
Yeah, I think so. Like, if you're playing Dune, right? Dune is a setting, right?
Hmm.
Arrakis. I mean, I think that there's what, 6 Dune books out, and every single one of them has been set on Arrakis, right? So like, there are some instances in Blade Runner where you're kind of like tunneled into a specific place, um, and I think that when you're running these games, having locations that players are familiar with anchor them quite a bit, actually. Um, I would caution that if you were starting to bring in characters, just be mindful of the fact that the game is about your players and not about canon characters coming in to visit. So I would try to steer clear of that as much as possible. Like, if you're bringing them once per season or something like that, and it's a very important scene, or if one of your characters, like, hey, I've always looked up to Catherine Janeway, and you give them a scene with Catherine Janeway in like the second to last episode of the season, like, you want those moments to be meaningful. You don't want them to take away from your players' stories.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
fully agree with that. Actually, that leads to a good question, which is, do players, and I suspect this is more related to players with a little bit less knowledge of the canon. Do players come with the expectation that they can actually play those kinds of characters, the existing characters? Like, is that a thing that they do when they come into this? I want to play Luke Skywalker, or I want to play Chani from Dune or something. Like, is that a thing you have to deal with as a GM running these kinds of games?
I think
I've
that
been
oh, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, so I've never had someone who so I'm running Blade Runner. I've never had someone come say like, I want to play Decker, like actual Harrison Ford
Yeah.
Decker, or I want to play Kay. Um, but instead, in my experience, players will sort of pull from the archetypes. Like, when I was running Blade Runner, one of my characters looked to I am blanking on his name, but he's in the original movie. He's the cop who makes the origami.
Oh yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, I
he
forget
just
his name too.
dresses in this very colorful, over-the-top way. And so my player was like, yeah, so I want to play this sort of grizzled cop and I want to dress like this guy. And so he didn't want to play him, but he took character notes and archetype notes from that. And I think that's fine, and I think that's something that like should sort of be encouraged because, it's you don't want someone to play Luke Skywalker, but like, yeah, I'm coming from a very rural, sheltered childhood. Whoops, I'm a Jedi now. That's a cool arc. It's a fun arc.
I think it comes down to, again, the conversations you have during your session zero, right? If the entire team wants to play, Red Squadron, and assault the Death Star, heck, if that's what they want to do, let them do that, right? But I think that when you're running a game for the first time, say like at PAX or something like that, and you're trying to present the game, often it's a lot more accessible to people that don't have experience with the game to see faces. Oh, I know who Daryl Dixon is. I'll play him in this Walking Dead. It's sometimes easier for them to do it that way. So I could see it being done for convention type stuff. Also think about like the presentation of the game itself, where if you look at the Marvel superheroes RPG, right, that pretty much right away is saying you should play one of our characters, right? There are
Yeah.
rules to play your own, but they're kind of buried like at the end of the chapter and things like that. So I think that I would prefer to not use canon characters when I play. But if that's something my players want, I would absolutely embrace that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like I haven't truly like experienced like someone like I like dead set on playing like a certain character, but like more like that says like okay, like I want to be like a bounty hunter like a Mandalorian, or I want to be like a force switch or something like that. That like I want to be um Boba Fett or like Mother Taliesin, that kind of stuff. But I think having that point of reference, like y'all both mentioned, is good to have. Like someone's like, okay, like this character, this like playbook or this archetype or this class plays like if you were doing this. Like you want to be the like the scum or villainy if you want to play like a bounty hunter, or if you want to be like the roguish face, you could play someone that looks like Han Solo or that kind of stuff. Han, whatever. It's I think it is good to have that reference. Um yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing, but if someone says like, yeah, I want to play a Darth Maul, I'm like, okay, let's take a couple steps back. Um, we're doing the session zero right now. Let's talk.
Well,
Yeah, and
So
like I said, it's all like the presentation is a big deal. Like if you look at Star Trek Adventures, the canon characters are nowhere in the books at all. If you want them, you can get them as digital downloads, but like they keep them out of the books unless they're in NPCs or adversaries. But like you're not going to see Captain Picard's stats anywhere in any of the books because they want you to create your story in the Star Trek world.
yeah.
if I was gonna do it, it would probably be all or nothing. So like I wouldn't want to have someone playing Luke Skywalker with four original characters. Instead, like if I was gonna run like a Marvel game, you're like, all right, who wants to be Tony Stark? Who wants to be Wolverine?
I call Spider-Man.
Okay, you can play
Or
Spider-Man, that's fine.
or even like you want to play the characters at the end of Rogue One, for
Yeah.
instance. Which there's a great game for that. But yeah, like if agree, like if you were to do that, go all or nothing. Don't be like you just said, like Luke Skywalker and his four cool friends that no one's met before.
So, somebody mentioned a few minutes ago about session zero. So, in your session zero, is there anything different about a session zero when you're talking about a licensed IP versus just a general system? Are there things that you have to go over in particular to make sure that they understand the context or the how do we run or who they can be or what have you?
So when I was doing the Blade Runner game, uh, I because Blade Runner is about a lot of things, right? It's got a core theme, but it's
Mhm.
also about a whole bunch of other things. And so what I told my players, these are the themes that I'm going to focus on. And one thing that I made sure, because we do like the lines and veils form, one thing I made sure to do was put a question on there, making sure, because I told them you can put, because in the game, you can decide if you want to play a human or a replicant. And so I told all my players, you can play a human. You can put that down on your sheet. One of you will be wrong about that. And, put a question on the lines and veils forums like, would you be okay with this pivot around your identity just to make sure that, the player who got that story was the person who would want that sort of story. And so yeah, and if I was doing like a Star Wars game, it'd be like, so who wants to find out they're force sensitive halfway through?
I think one thing, especially if you're doing like a long standing, like one thing I had to talk to our players about is like, okay, I have this idea, and it's during this point in history of Star Wars. Because if you're playing Star Wars, so much could change in like literally like 5 to 20 years.
Yeah.
So we had to like go through, it's like, okay, we're doing here, we're playing the first year after the Clone Wars ended, and then like what impact that has on all your players and all your characters and that. Um, and then if you're playing a Jedi, that's gonna have consequences, big consequences. And that's good to bring up during session zero because like if you wanted to play a Jedi, it's like, oh, you mean like I can't go out in public like normally ever? Like I can't wear the cool robe all the time? Damn, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well, is like um talking about the different, like especially with these long arcing like Dune and Star Wars and Star Trek, and we're talking thousands of years of canon in theory in a lot of these places. And coming to a consensus at that session zero of when are we playing and how might that change the tone, how might that change the expectations on our characters, how might that change the technology that we're interacting with. I think that's a really important discussion. I would put to game masters out there, if you have a specific era that you want to run in, bring that up during your session zero, right? Because you need to have fun too, right? If someone says, "Well, I want to play in the old Republic era," and you're not really into that, have a discussion around that in your session zero, saying, "Hey, could we maybe bring some of the elements of that to this era," or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to do a whole show on session zero. In fact, I might do one this year just on session zero. There is a question in chat that I think is a good question. Any settings you'd like to see licensed that haven't been done yet? Like any sci-fi settings that you're like, man, that should be a game.
I'm dying
Uh,
for Sequest.
that'd be fun.
I'd love Sequest. I'd like to see like a really good rendition of Stargate, not dabbling with the 5e system. But those are the two big ones for me.
What about the OA where you get to be murdered every session for a while to see if you survive until you cross the dimensions? Oh my god. I think there are some maybe to avoid. That would be one of them. Oh yeah, Pern.
So it technically exists. It technically exists, but it's sort of like been preserved in amber in like the high 90s, early aughts system of game design. So what I would really like to see is a more modern take on Babylon 5.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be
Because
cool.
like with Babylon 5, it's like it's super mechanical, super numbers, super dice. But that was like the design trend of the time, but that's not what Babylon 5 is about. It's about the people and their relationships and how those evolve. And so I would like to see a new edition of that come out. That'd be a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm saying you can often, just by opening the books, you can tell often when they were designed by things like that.
This 2023 and like the end of 2023 got me really into like survival horror. And one thing I think would be wild to play is like a Dead Space TTRPG. Because Dead Space in itself is a wild game with wild setting and like lore. But I think like it'll be it'll be hard to do without just being like a murder box once you're getting in. Like maybe like
Yeah.
similar to like how Alien is. Alien's a murder box. Alien is like a really good game to die in.
Yeah.
Easy game to die in. That's why you make 3 characters at the start of the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, if you start bringing in video games that you want to pour in, there's like a never-ending slew, right? The other one that popped to my
Mhm.
mind is the Orville. I would love to get an Orville
Oh, yeah.
role-playing game out there.
Mhm, mhm.
You have to
Just
have the right kinds of
a
players that
Douglas
can
Adams
do that.
game.
Yeah, you have to have the right kind of players to pull off humor. Like humor is hard for players to do, like beginning to end of a session. But you almost need comedians to pull it off. But I mean, some people are. They're just natural comedians.
Yeah, the problem is humor is so subjective, right? So
Yeah.
you got to know your audience
Mhm.
too, and know the people that are around you. We did the Lower Decks campaign guide for Star Trek Adventures, and we have a whole chapter in there about using humor in games and how to make sure everybody's comfortable and whatnot when you are using humor. So, yeah, but I think that would work really well in the Orville.
I'm not sure anyone here is the right one to answer this question, but anyone here know the steps to get the licensing rights on some of these dead licenses like Bionic 6, Thundercats, Silverhawks, etc.? I don't know that answer. I don't know if any
Oh,
of you would have any clue.
Find a lawyer.
Hire a lawyer. Yes, that might actually be the
yeah, that
go.
would be my.
Sorry, Michael, that's the best I could do.
Sorry, I didn't have the answers to this. I would love to have a couple IP lawyers on here for a show one day. That would be amazing. All right, we have another question too. When you're planning a game to GM, what is your preference? Plan out what specifics you want to run, or being more open to seeing what the players want and come to a consensus, even if the consensus wasn't quite what you wanted to run? I mean, that can pertain to any game, kind of game, by the way.
I generally do a mix. So I will start out with an outline of the script I want to run and the story I want to tell, and then I'll pitch it to my players. Who wants to be a part of this storytelling, this type of tale? And then we will do the character creation, and I'll see what sort of characters they make, and like, oh yeah, that one's the secret replicant. Uh, or just adjust on the fly. Like, oh yeah, no, they have a really cool take on this particular theme. Let's go explore that. Let's go jump down that rabbit hole. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think having a general idea to like get people in, having an idea is always just good in general, like to have a group. Um, just like using my show Unwavering, for instance, like I threw out to a bunch of my friends, like, hey, I want to do a Star Wars show. It was a bunch of Force sensitive people after the end of the Clone Wars. And then once you get the slew of people that are feral about the idea together, you're like, okay, what kind of story do you all want to tell, and then what kind of character do you want to be, and that, and like the show started like slowly started to move from so slowly like a heist show to more just like a general like adventure exploring identity and that kind of stuff. um and once you kind of have a general idea, I'd say go in also with a more open mind. like full disclosure, the first like 4 or 5 sessions of my show, um, I didn't know what was coming next. I was just reacting off the players. And then finally, after something clicks, like, okay, I have the rest of the season planned out, vaguely planned out, because another staple is never expect your players to do what you expect them to do. My
Totally
campaign
true.
has changed 3 times already.
Yep.
That is the truth. I do think that, as I mentioned earlier, um, your fun as the GM needs to be taken into consideration as well. So if you have ideas that you would like to pursue, and players during your session 0 start going a different direction, absolutely try to be as flexible as possible, or see how you can make connections between your idea and their idea. I do think that when you are running like individual sessions, you have a beginning, you have a climax, and you have an ending. And then the stuff in between, uh, let it manipulate things, let it change things. I've had entire sessions where I put the players in a room and say, "Here's what's going on," and then they just run with it, and we end up in a different place than I had expected. And that's okay, because everybody had a blast and told a great story and whatnot. So have an idea of where you want to go, but be ready to pivot as needed.
Yeah, I do something a little different. It depends on the length of the campaign I'm running. If I'm running a very long campaign, it's almost impossible to have an arc that can be meaningful from beginning to end and actually land there anyway. So I don't try and create like long arcs for campaigns. For a short thing, like last year I ran Tales from the Loop a couple of times, and when I ran it, I had sort of a storyline that was a base storyline that I was going to build from. So I had an inciting incident to make sure that everything got started, and then I sort of let it pivot around. Like you have this line, the trajectory, and let it pivot around the trajectory. Often just going way off the trajectory, and you can end up in a completely different place. And I let the characters dictate that. But if they sort of get into a meandering moment, I will use the arc line as a way to kind of pivot them to something that I know could happen. And whether they want to do it or not is still up to them. Like, I believe in player agency, but I also believe that you need to be able to plan something so that you can be prepared. So I plan, and one thing that I think most people that GM a lot learn is that everything you've ever planned is eventually going to be used somewhere. It may not be in the game you plan, but it'll be used somewhere. You plan a tavern brawl somewhere else, it'll be used here, because you just have this collective memory of all your games in you that are ready to run at any moment. So
I do feel Tales from the Loop goes in that direction quite a bit, because there are kids, and if your
yeah,
players are really thinking like kids, you're always going to be taken by surprise. That was actually what I was thinking about when I was just talking earlier, was a Tales from the Loop session that I ran.
yeah,
Such a
yeah.
fantastic game.
It is, and I'm running Electric State this year, so be prepared. It's already announced. I don't know who. I haven't started casting, but I'll be doing that at some point in the next few months. So we got another question in chat. Any pitfall streaming actual plays with big IPs? And this is actually an interesting question. Copyright-wise, Star Trek's Clear Skies and Shield of Tomorrow seem embraced by the publisher. Wondering about others like Marvel and Star Wars. Like, do you run into pitfalls, say, using the Marvel logo to show that it's a Marvel game you're running, or using characters from the Marvel universe, and you're streaming? Because at that point you're creating entertainment, not just running a home game. Have you ever run into issues there?
I haven't. When I do my overlays, I usually like to put the publisher logo up there as just sort of a way to like give credit, like these are the people who make this game. But uh, it's always a good idea if you're doing an actual play to go to the game publishers, because most game publishers nowadays will have a specific section on their website of like things we would like you to do and not do if you're running an actual play, something online. Um, because even though like it's kind of sort of technically infringing, like nobody wants to be Wizards of the Coast. Like, they sent the Pinkertons after me because I was running a Marvel show. Nobody wants that. Um, yeah, and sometimes I read on guidelines like, please don't put the logo on the overlay because in their mind, that is sort of an indication that they're endorsing that and they don't want to convey that. Like, oh, all right, that makes sense as well. Just go on Photoshop, hide that layer.
Yeah.
Uh, I haven't run into many issues like for Alien for our Mother May I Alien series of Goblins and Gays. We tend to reach out to Free League like, hey, we're gonna be running your game any way you want to like boost us or promote us, like please. And like usually we don't get an answer. Um Sometimes we do. But like it's hit or miss. Um One thing just generally, especially for streams especially, just avoid like music. Music is gonna be like your biggest like worry.
Yeah.
Um
Yep.
I'm as much as I'd love to play Duel of the Fates on all my episodes, I'm not gonna get away with that. I Disney is everywhere. Usually they don't care, but they're
Oh, oh,
everywhere.
I have a tip. This guy is everywhere. His name's Kevin McLeod. He also goes by Incompetech. He does so much royalty-free music, and it's all really, really good. You can find him like everywhere. He's in the Roll20 app. Uh, yeah, just shout out. Thank you, Mr. McLeod. I use so much of your music.
I For both like Goblins and Gays and also Unwavering Force, we separately have like an Epidemic Sound subscription. It's just like $10 a month, but that has been like a life send both for sound effects and also music, all the music. Like they have a thing on your website, like, hey, go to the website and look at their licensing stuff, like what you need to do. And there's excellent music on there. Um yeah, I just like be wary. Music is going to be your biggest offender for streams. Um, yeah, but yeah, like if you could find license free or royalty free, or find like a manageable license for like Epidemic Sound. There's a bunch of other websites as well. That's perfect because music does add a lot.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would just point out is like, whenever you are doing a stream, try not to like share full page screenshots of the books, that type of stuff as well. You want to avoid because that can get you into some trouble as well.
I actually did have an IP issue with Old Gods, which I thought was very interesting. It was the first time I'd ever had something come up, but when I started posting about the upcoming game, I was using the Old Gods logo to show that it was an Old Gods stream, right? I thought, oh, this is cool, no big deal. And I never heard anything negative about it from Monty Cook or anything, but the podcasters asked me, can you please not use the logo? It may confuse some of our listeners, because I was saying I was going to drop it on YouTube too. So they were a little concerned. So I made my own fake Old Gods logo to create differentiation and make sure that it didn't step on that. But that was a very interesting, eye-opening moment when that happened. And it really did take me back. And by the way, the music thing is completely right. Everybody be wary of music. Music will get you copyright strikes. It will get you blocked from your channel, and it will happen in three. You get 3 strikes and you're out, and you're gone. So find legal means of using music, and there's great services out there already for either music that is adjustable as you play or just good music, like they were just saying a few minutes ago.
So many of my videos on YouTube have been flagged like, we recognize that this music is copyrighted, but it's also licensed, so you're good.
Yep, I have had that too because I do licensed music occasionally. In fact, I'm actually commissioning music, which is kind of amazing. I did it for the first Old Gods, and I'm doing it for Invisible Sun right now, and I cannot tell you enough about how awesome it is to have your own music. Just awesome. All right, so is there anything? This is collaborative storytelling. So has an actor or a player ever saved your game from something you did poorly? Like, as a GM, sometimes you have a bad night or you make a mistake. Like, they did something that helped save your session that night. Where their knowledge of the IP was either equal or better than yours in that particular place, and they rules lawyered you to a positive to a positive outcome.
Oh,
Like they
well,
knew the setting or so well, maybe better than you. They were able to help you solve a problem.
not necessarily setting, but I have a couple players in my regular rotation, uh, who can really master rules easily. I need a couple times to play it before I really internalize how the rules work. And then I've got a couple players who can just read the book and they know it. And, just them pointing out, like, oh, yeah, no, I just got a crit. Or that bad guy just got a crit on us. I appreciate him because he's honest like that. Like, oh, yeah, you're right. He did get a crit. Let me go roll those. Oh, your head explodes. I'm sorry, dude.
Yeah.
I for me, not necessarily like I haven't had that situation, but because for Unwavering Force we're actually using Pathfinder Second Edition, there's a long reason about that. Most of it is just like a lot of us like the system. Um, so we have a lot of homebrew elements, and a lot of it was just like going back and forth between knowing the mechanics of Pathfinder and knowing the lore and the like how stuff works in Star Wars and kind of figuring out how to marry them the best. Like, hey, like I wanted to be able to do like Night Sister magic. What kind of class like do you think works best? What do you do that? Should we flavor something? It's like, well, when they use this magic, it's kind of like they're literally tapping into the force, the wills, the whatever in a specific kind of way. So maybe using it like this would be best. And also they get to summon these like really cool like magical daggers that I could just come out of nowhere. What if I was like a magus and did that kind of stuff? Um, but most of the time it's me doing the reverse of like, hey, like I'm gonna throw this at you and see how long it takes all to notice, like, hey, wait, doesn't this do that? Which has led to very fun moments in the game.
Yeah, it hasn't really happened in a game that I run, but in a game that I play, I do a play-by-post Star Trek game with a couple of the writers from Star Trek Adventures, and
Cool.
we're always double checking each other to make sure that, like,
Right.
hey, like, is that an accurate statement? Is that something? Does that jive with what we know is going on and things like that? And we bounce these ideas back and forth outside of game in an outside chat, so that we can to basically take our what we're doing like in the game and create like a little novella after the episode's done. But yeah, that's always good. And when I try a new game out, when I try to run a new game, so like I tried running the starter set Fallout game. I know nothing about Fallout, but people have been asking for it. I was, getting a couple of my players to guide me through, that, oh, this robot's a servant robot, things like that.
Yeah. So I have a question in the chat. It's a little bit off topic, but maybe it can be answered pretty quickly, I think. So what's your advice for new GMs and groups who want to get into streaming but don't have the high-tech know-how or the resources to put a lot of polish on it? I would say have someone else do other stuff for you. Don't make your own overlays if you don't know how to build them right. Let someone else do it for you. It's okay to start without music because music adds a layer of complexity that until you're ready to handle, it's totally okay to not have music. Run something you know well so that you're not having to deal with both tech and narrative in a complex way all the time. YouTube is an amazing resource to learn how to stream. It is not that complex. It's just complex enough to be annoying when you first start. Anything you guys want to throw in to help someone get started?
Focus on the cast and the players. If you have a group of people who genuinely enjoy each other's company and genuinely enjoy what they're doing, that will attract audience and it will probably attract the exact sort of audience that you want.
Um, I would say right off the bat, don't invest a lot until you know this is something you want to do. Um, Look for
Yeah.
all the free resources for streaming. I may even recommend trying out doing podcasting first, like just straight up doing like a audio only podcast, because that will lean you into it. I started just doing podcasts and only started doing the streams like the past 2 years and change. Um, but like look at like Discord, look at like CraigBot, it's free. Craig is my mortal enemy, but also is a free recording software that a bot that you could just put into your Discord. Discord's free for now, probably, hopefully. Who knows, Sony. But yeah, just like do that first, invest in that, use that like Audacity is free, Reaper has a free trial. There's even like free video editing, like there's like Clipchamp is by Microsoft. It is like if Canva made something for video, that's a free thing you could use, all that stuff. And just do it. I think just like getting people together and recording the game. Um,
Yeah.
if you're just starting off doing something, don't like, okay, I need to edit 17 layers. I need 30 different sound effects. I need 5 different tracks of music. You're going to put yourself into like burnout before you even release the first episode.
Yeah,
So,
and a small cast is easier to deal with than a big one. Don't start with 8
exactly.
players or 7 players. Start with 3, and make yourself have some easy things to do within all of it. And really, running
Mhm.
OBS or Streamlabs, once you've done it a few times, is not going to be overwhelming. Setting it
Mhm.
up the first time will be overwhelming, but you can take a whole weekend and just spend your time getting it right, and run tests, go live for a few minutes at a time and see if it works while nobody knows who you are. All of those things totally are legit. And honestly, when someone sees that you have nobody following and you're on for 5 minutes, you're not gonna you don't worry about somebody showing up. They're not gonna. And even if they do, you can say, "Oh, just testing," and they'll be fine. So yeah, an interesting question. Wrong show. I do have a show coming on streaming, so be prepared. It is coming. As a GM, what creative choices have you had to make to to avoid running certain things within a licensed property, like running Star Trek? Do you avoid running horror scenarios, things like that? Like you have to make some give and takes because it's licensed, and it wouldn't feel right within the IP, I would think.
So for me, the big challenge when running Blade Runner, so the game does have the very narrow focus. It presumes all characters are going to be members of LAPD, Reptitech unit.
Mm-hmm.
This particular city, this particular job. Um, and for me and my players, the challenge was basically like not turning the show into propaganda.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I actually had a disclaimer at the beginning of every show, like, I'm from in Los Angeles. I can tell you, the LAPD really, really sucks. They're always going to suck. And we're not trying to glorify them in any way. We're just like exploring, uh, themes about corruption and power and authority. Um, and so that was something where I really had to step lightly in running that game.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
interesting.
mean, I think a lot of these bigger IPs have got so much content out there that they're really flexible in the types of stories that you can run. The sacrifices might put you into a specific little era within those IPs. But I don't think necessarily that you need to sacrifice. Like you could do horror in Star Wars if you wanted to. Horror is more about how you're telling the story and the mystery that's involved and the stress that you're building, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we even see in the Marvel movies, Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness was very much a horror movie, so I think that one of the beautiful things about the bigger IPs you have that type of flexibility. Of course, when you get to something that only has a couple of movies or a couple of books or something like that, that's when you have to make cuts to make it feel like whatever the IP is that you're running.
Yeah, I mean, for, like just throwing it out to like for Star Wars, like our show, we ran a horror episode for Halloween in Star Wars. It's there's so much stuff in there, you could definitely make it possible. I think it's just like if you're going for a very specific vibe, or idea, you making sacrifices is like maybe something you'll need to do, but like for instance, Goblins and Gays, our Alien series. Um, one of the series is we have two different crews going on. One of us living the horror survival of dealing with aliens. I'm part of that group. We're very much living that. The other crew are doing a murder mystery. They're like having romance during the game because they somehow have found time to do that on a derelict ship. So it's possible. It's just like finding the right group, finding the right people, like finding the right setting for it. Um, I do feel that almost leaning in to the like IP's genre actually allows for a more enjoyable thing. Like Star Wars is a space opera. Leaning into this, leaning into the sci-fi elements of it, and like leaning into the drama, the over the top stuff, allows you to have more freedom to do um more stuff with it. But I don't think you that should restrict you. You could do anything you want in anything. How good it is, or how much fun it is up to you and your table.
Yeah. A question that came up that I have a feeling everyone will have some answer to this one. Have you ever been inspired to use a story from your games as a screenplay, novel, story you submit for publishing or anything like that? That it was like, oh my God, that is so good. I have to turn this into something bigger than my game.
If I have the opportunity, I will sometimes take game notes and publish them to the relevant community content program.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm learning how to create a comic book script for an idea from my first Star Trek campaign that I ran because I thought I was onto something good. So, um, yeah,
Cool.
I don't know if anything will happen with it, but I really like the comic book genre a lot.
I haven't personally like had the chance to do so, but I definitely have like notes from previous games and campaigns that I definitely either wanted to expand into like a short story or even like making that personally like specifically an audio drama like fully like scripted or even like written like taking stuff and like to do its own bespoke game. Like I do some like small indie games like I've released on itch, and I have things that I have like in my to do folders like take this, add mechanics and turn it into a game. um yeah.
Yeah, I think that as creatives, we're always sort of drawn to all different kinds of channels because there's no one thing that your brain thinks of. Like, you don't only think of games, you think of writing or art or whatever is going on with it. So I think it's sort of a natural thing to like imagine it going beyond what you've done with it as a game in the first place. So yeah, we are right about 9 o'clock. So why don't we take a 5 minute break and we'll be right back with you guys. All these questions in chat, we'll get to them in a few minutes. All right, see you in a few minutes.
14.
It closes quickly, snaps closed around your finger, and then your finger slips out, and then the hand slowly goes back open, and then it twitches one finger.
Yeah, can I see Jimmy coming towards
He is
us?
the fastest of this group. He is heading up first and foremost.
All right.
Stick raised.
Jimmy, you gonna stay dead today, my friend. All right, let's hope I can roll well. All right. Well,
I'm going to bite her.
Evangeline, you see Volney go to this girl, to this woman, and like a vampire, just bring a bite down. Where are you biting her?
I'm biting her right on her neck.
You bite her neck. Can you make me an intellect roll, please? Your wings come out full and reach down to the floor. Black, raven black feathers with blue iridescence. And Volney tears this woman to pieces. Blood pools on the bottom, spatters the walls. What are you doing while this happens?
Volney?
Oh, reliable. I'm
Yeah,
actually
but
going
I
to
think-
throw my shield, which is actually a miner's helmet, and I'll be like, "You best stop your fussing," and just kind of throw it at him.
Oh my god.
Shut up for a darn minute. It ain't gone.
I know it ain't gone.
Then we need to focus on getting it gone.
Well, if it's in somebody else, then this circle don't even matter at this point.
Yeah.
Zeb, what'd you do?
Can I even answer? I mean, at this point, would I be
You can
able
answer,
to?
but you have.
Terrible, how horrible, how nasty things get. But I will say that, God or no God, whatever, at least we can have each other's back. Man, women, we can hold each other up. We can help get through these, whatever is going on. So I believe in God now, yes, but I've always believed in you and Albie and Thea and people and human beings. So
I'm starting to draw some doubts because they come to collect people, all right? And I'm not talking just on money or interest. They was about to steal Irvin, all right? And I don't like the guy much
When
myself.
you were a
In
child,
fact,
they
he
were
had
about
me-
to steal you, and I had to give mother to them to keep you alive and keep you safe. So don't tell me about the debts one has to pay. I know the debts we have to pay in this life. I have had to give up the hardest thing that a person could possibly give up, other than their own child. I know what debts are.
So you didn't do anything. You didn't fight back. You didn't try and kill him. You didn't
Of
try
course
and
I
you gave her
did.
away.
I
You gave her
know
away like she was some rabid dog. You just gave her away, huh?
I couldn't kill them. I tried to kill them. I put a knife through that lady's back so many times that day, and she rose up like a devil.
All of a sudden, I just had simply passed out, and I don't understand. I had bought a completely closed beverage. Can you help me understand what is going on here? What sort of things are being sent to this town from your suppliers in this town?
Well,
Like, what sort of thing is absolutely happening? I demand to speak to the manager of this town.
You mean the mayor? Well, I mean, nobody actually.
Does this town not have some sort of manager? I mean, what is going on here?
We have a mayor. Mamie Hawkinen is the mayor.
I mean the manager.
Unscrews it and then straightens it out to like about the length of it. She says, "Well, I'll tell you that's a big paw print. It's about it's about 19 inches."
I don't need no tweezers to tell me that it's big.
I like my tweezers, thank you. I just put them in my bag.
I will fill the mountains with the dead. Your hills, your valleys, and your streams will be filled with the people slaughtered by my sword. I will make you desolate forever. Your cities will never be rebuilt. Then you will know that I am God.
Sometimes white-tailed deer get a bit crazy. Too many of them start wrecking the ecosystem. You're gonna keep them wrecking the ecosystem. Sometimes you gotta call the herd. Maybe this is that herd that we gotta call. You know what I mean?
Annie, maybe you could be a woman of science one day. Look at you.
Not everyone can look their own dreams in the face and not blink, Volney. Who knows what his heart was recovering from or recovering to? What might have been the world to you might have been him trying to convince himself to believe in something for the first time. There's a grace there. we all shed innocent love becoming full, you know? But it can be hard to walk away from or carry. But Vincent and Volney's adorable because together that makes a W, and that's a win.
Part of me just wants to open up and let you run out into those woods, Barbara, but...
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for hanging around while we take care of our bioessentials. Let me see. I'm going to go back a little bit in chat and just see if there are any questions that I missed that I want to bring up. I think there was one somewhere up there. Yes. So have you ever mixed a new genre into an existing IP? Yeah, go on.
Yes. I don't want to keep name dropping my Blade Runner game, but I ran the Electric Dreams, the published module that comes with the book. And then it was time to run one of my original mysteries, and I'm like, yeah, so a spaceship blew up in dry dock, and they think a replicant did it, so you've got to go investigate. So head on over to Wayland Yutani.
That's beautiful.
So it was a total fake out, but it's gonna have a payoff because so season 1 ended with the surviving characters. It was a bloodbath at the end. It was awful. The surviving characters boarded the moon bus to go to the colonies. And so of course I'm gonna put them on a Wayland Yutani spaceship. And I haven't quite decided what will happen next, but throughout the course of the investigation, they also got to hang out with David, who is the replicant character in the prequels.
Good lord.
Yeah. Cool.
For Unwavering, I mentioned that we did a horror episode. One of our cast, Navar, who is a host of a Secret Nerd podcast, he has written a game called Corrupted, which is heavily inspired by The Last of Us. So we ran that game in a Star Wars setting, and it turned out very good. It was like the Corrupted is like a weird goop alien, and it was attacking our ship, but also like it was like messing with our memories, and it was really really wild. I didn't have to run it, so I was so happy just being a player in this setting. But yeah, the Wayland Yutani, the alien Blade Runner thing, that's giving me so much joy, by the way. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, so not necessarily, well, I guess it is kind of a new genre, but I had this idea for a civilization who, in Star Trek, who were druidic in nature. They worshipped the core of their planet, and they had used all their resources and their core was dying. So I wanted to have something like they got desperate and somehow they got changed and whatnot. And I determined when all was said and done that they created this giant plan on if they got resources from all these other planets in their sector, they would be able to reignite their core. And I was trying to figure what type of species this would be. And I decided to make them essentially mind flayers in Star Trek.
No.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a good story arc. The players were very terrified, and in the end, in the very Star Trek way, they helped the mind flayers reignite their core. It was really really cool.
When prepping for this show, I had an idea that I thought, I wonder if anyone's done this, because you can do almost anything in Star Trek, right? It just covers so many genres. And I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if they went in the holodeck and they ended up in something like Severance? Like, that would really mess with their heads, with their whatever they do there being cut from what they do here.
Yeah, and having the holodeck,
shockingly cool.
having the holodeck really like opens up what you could do.
Yeah, Yeah, totally. Especially if they don't. There's so many ways you can get to it, but yeah. And that actually led to the next question, which I think is a really good question. By the way, questions in chat have been awesome tonight. So, what's one idea you've had in game that should be part of the real IP stories that you know is so darn good it ought to be there?
So in Blade Runner, you have multiple models of replicants. And so one thing I added near the end of season 1 of my show, hi sort of solid. So one thing that I added was one character, the one who is the secret replicant, uh, essentially encountered someone who looked exactly like him. They were the exact same model of replicant. And uh, it just sort of like kind of makes sense to me that like there's multiple Roy baddies running around in that universe. There's multiple Ks because you've got this template. Let's make 1,000 replicants based on this template.
Yeah. And they only have 4 years to differentiate anyway. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I had this idea in a Star Trek game where we have the Trill, which are, of course, of these symbiotic relationships. It's a very spiritual thing and whatnot. And my concept was, in this case, the host that was going to be receiving the Trill got bumped up the ladder to get the Trill symbiote embedded in them. And it turns out that person had seen something they weren't supposed to see. And they put the symbiote in, and the symbiote's goal was to make sure that person doesn't remember what they saw. So kind of gave a little bit of more story to the Trill, which I thought was kind of cool.
One thing that we're doing something for the Mother May I the Alien season that is super cool that our GM for it's not me, it's Ferris, I'm a player for it, that it is really like thematic and cool for it, but I can't say it because it's not released yet. It's like it's literally like core spoilers for what's happening. But stuff like that. One thing that I'm really enjoying is in a Lancer game I played. We have like this weird like electro like bio like goo creature that I think would fit like super well in specifically like a Star Trek setting, because it's like it goes in, it destroys like the whole ship system, and is just going through and trying to absorb everything. It's like the killer ooze, except it's in space, and it has more like resistances than a xenomorph. Um, and it's just all consuming. We had to we fought it in mechs, but I think not fighting it in mechs would also be even more terrifying.
Yeah, if I could be self-serving for a moment, I think that my Sentience role-playing game, the concept of terraforming robots that have gained sentience before humanity has returned to settle the planet, I think that could be ported into Star Trek very, very easily. And, so they stumble upon the civilization that's all robots. And the robots maybe think that Starfleet is humanity returning, but turns out it's something else. I think it'd be a very Star Trek story.
I have a question about the TTRPGs themselves. So, for a new GM, do you think that most of the TTRPGs that are IP based give someone enough knowledge that without having to go and watch every Star Wars movie or all the Star Trek shows, or say Blade Runner 2049, is there enough content and context within them that they could easily understand what they're running without having a full knowledge of the IP?
For Free League, I would say yes. Also for Modiphius's Dune, and also their Fallout. I think they do a really good job of communicating the setting and what this game is about, especially Blade Runner, because it gives you, this is actually one of the things I really like the most about this game, is that the GM chapter gives you a way to procedurally generate a mystery. So even if you have never seen the movies, even if you've never read a single word of Philip K. Dick, you can still really easily create a game about cyberpunk corporate corruption.
Nice. Yeah, it's great when the games have really good guidance, not just in character development or whatever, but GM advice and tools to help ease them into it.
Yeah, I would say like even like Fantasy Flight Star Wars system, if for whatever reason you're getting into it, you pick up a Star Wars book and you don't know anything about Star Wars. The Fantasy Flight one actually does a really good job of explaining, hey, this is what the scum and villainy are. This is what the Rebel Alliance, the Jedi, the Sith, the Star Wars. Like they do a decently good job of like, hey, when you're in this world, these are what these characters are like and what kind of story you could tell with it. Um, One thing you said Cyberpunk, and I was just thinking about the Cyberpunk Red TTRPG, and that's like also an excellent one, like down to just like how the way the character classes, or not even the classes, like how you make a character is set up, really gets you in the world. Like, hey, this is how this kind of person in this setting would work. These are kind of like the skills you would have or you would need to be successful.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think yeah, I think like getting into a game, I think having that information right there in the book really helps you get in the mind. It's like, okay, well, if I wanted to play a super cool mercenary, then yeah, I would need points in cool. And I don't remember if points in ninja are a thing, but that's how I've been playing the Cyberpunk game, video game. So that kind of stuff would be just like front and center.
Yeah, I think that most of the companies that have been picking up the IPs are doing a good thick section at the beginning of this is the history of the IP essentially. There are all these eras. These are the typical things that you see. This is the typical technology that you see. And then of course, like what always is helpful for a GM is to go through the character creation process yourself so that you can understand that as well. And that like the life path system in Star Trek Adventures is like so detailed and really gives you a feel. This is what you did at the academy. This is where your first assignment was. These are the major events that have happened. And it really, really takes you through. It actually walks you through the Star Trek universe, which is cool.
So there was a question that I think is a good follow up to that one, which is how do you sell a group on playing a game based on an IP none of the players know well without making the players feel like they have a lot of homework? Do you use intros, cheat sheets, jump right into the setting and just go? Like, what are your tools?
So this isn't necessarily a science fiction game, but Night Witches by Jason Morningstar has the best introductory scenario I've ever seen in that the game is you play these Russian female fighter pilots in World War II. And the introductory scenario is the group of new recruits showing up, getting their uniforms. Of course, their uniforms don't fit. The boots are too big because they're all men's sizes. And you go around and you're given a tour of the base. And just as all of this unfolds, you also proceed on character creation step by step. And it's a really good way. It's one of the best ways I've ever seen to introduce a setting and a game at the same time. And I've sort of stolen that method. And I like to do it when I have the chance of, all right, you're a new recruit, you're here, you're level 1, starting out character. Let's get you run you through an orientation, and as you run through the orientation, you're introduced to the setting, and as you're introduced to a new setting element, you also get to add something to your character sheet as part of the creation process. I really like the way that that works.
I definitely think that if you wanted to bring people into a thing that having cheat sheets, even having like pre-gens or make characters for your players would be the best way to get them enjoyed and like to at least like sell them like, hey, I have these characters made. Um, for like in the Cyberpunk game, you could be a person that could literally pick up a car with their bare hands and while also at the same time using your mind to hack into their bank info and get like $1 million from them. I have it right here in front of you. All you need to do is role play and roll the dice. Um, I feel like putting the onus on the players is like a little bit much because like you want them to be in there enjoyable unless they're like mechanic sickos like I am and want to learn how to build a character. Um yeah, but that's like a here or there. I think having everything ready is like the best way to get people involved.
Yeah, I think that if I want to run a game and I want to pitch it to someone and they don't know the IP at all, I want to use generalizations at first, like the big bullet points that you know are going to happen every time. In Star Trek, it's a hopeful future. You have ships that go around and explore. You do weird science things. You try to solve things by talking before firing weapons. If it's Star Wars, I'll say we have space wizards with laser swords. We have a galactic empire that's like, putting everyone down, and just hit the big bullet points first and then say, listen, we are telling our story, right? We are telling our story. We're not telling their story. We are forging our own path. And if you want to bring in something from that story that you've heard or that interests you, we can make that work. But let's focus on the story that we want to tell first. I have a character in my Star Trek Forefront campaign who knew very little to nothing about Star Trek. All he knew that was Bajorans were these spiritual people and whatnot. And he's like, well, they worship the prophets and all this type of stuff. And he said, what if I could be a Bajoran that doesn't worship the prophets? And I was like, all right, let's roll with it. Like little things like that. He knew nothing else about Star Trek, but we made a really cool character that we told a story with out of that one little bit that he wanted. The second thing, the follow-up that I would say is, if I am going to be bringing in an idea or a concept from a movie, book, or episode that into the game, I might recommend it to the players saying, hey, next week, you might want to go watch this episode of Star Trek. And if you do, awesome. If you don't, no big deal. We're still going to have a good time.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like one thing that I did, like for instance, again with Unwavering Force, one thing I was like, hey, maybe watch Andor before we get into this, because that story, especially she's like, I brought in my players. Hey, do you want to take down an evil empire? I got you. Watch this, and you'll have the blueprint.
Yeah, I mean Andor. I mean, if I were to play Star Wars, that's the Star Wars I'd be most interested in. I love all the subterfuge and all that kind of stuff. Just amazing. What questions do you get asked by potential cast members? Like, what do they ask you about the IP? Like, which I think is an indicator of what they're thinking about going into playing an IP anyway.
I think the question that I get asked most often is by a player who's not super familiar with the setting or the IP is what sort of role should I play in the party? And I like that as a question.
Yeah.
I often hear, what is the system like? Does the system bring the IP to life? That's something that I've heard several times.
Yeah, like what role could I play? What role do you want me to play? Or can I play this kind of role? Are ones I've been asked for before. Especially it's like I have a player that definitely is like, hey, I want to do this that's like not necessarily like common. Am I able to do that? It's like, okay, well, let's figure it out. The biggest question I get from one specific player is, can I have a pet? How could it work mechanically? Does it have to be mechanically? That kind of stuff.
Of course, the pet question. Al, you didn't answer what do you say to them when they ask you that?
So I explained briefly what my interpretation or how I feel the rule system accentuates whatever the IP is, and then also where does the rule system kind of fall short, in my opinion. And we might, even during our session 0, if we have 30 minutes left at the end of the session, we might actually roll out a quick scenario and show how the system actually works. And then we discuss about it after.
And Dusty, did you let them have the pets?
Yes, actually, if you check our official artwork, we have an unknown alien creature, but their name is Callisto, and they are the best boy.
Okay. So there's a good follow-up question even in there. How do you feel about a player wanting to create a PC that introduces some lore that somewhat contradicts existing lore of the scenario? I would say of the setting more than the scenario, but maybe the scenario. Not in a major way, but isn't it in keeping with some canon, or is it breaking canon?
Personally, oh, go Rachel.
Yeah,
go.
no, go. So for me, it would be very situational dependent. Like, you earlier talked about, well, what if I'm playing an atheist Bajoran? Like, to me, that seems fine. That's not canon breaking or genre breaking. You're just playing someone who has a different idea than most of the rest of his culture. I think that's fine. Uh, but then again, like, if I'm trying to run a Star Wars game and someone is like, but what if I play the Mahdi? And I'm like, those don't go together. I'm sorry.
I mean, personally, I love like competing ethos at a table, but that has to be like established like in either session 0 or before the session begins, like if someone's introducing it. Like, hey, like I'm gonna be a Jedi. Well, I'm gonna be your twin brother, but I'm gonna be a Sith. Um, and that's actually just like our show, legitimately, which has been very fun. We're just like, it's literally our twin players. Um, I was like, well, I've been the Jedi, yeah, and like I'm out here telling you, just murk a person. They're right in front of you. It's like why are you yelling at me? That kind of stuff. Or even like, I don't even know what a Jedi or the Force is. Or like a Night Sister, who's like, Jedi ideals are dumb. Why are we even arguing about this? Um, all these competing ideas at the table just gives like excellent role play. But it has to be established that like, hey, I think all the stuff that you're doing is kind of like silly and dumb. And I'm gonna tell you about that in character. And the other person's like, cool, I'm just gonna like hold my values and that kind of stuff.
What I often say to the other players in the games that I play with Star Trek Adventures is, anything I see in a Star Trek show can make sense with 2 lines of dialogue. That's literally all it takes to make something canon, right? Or to contradict something that we already know. So if somebody comes to me and it's not game breaking, it's not genre breaking, with an idea saying, hey, can I have a Gorn Starfleet member? I would say, all right, well, what 2 sentences make that canon? Like, how to make that our canon? So, and the other thing I would do is I would make sure during the session 0 that everybody is on board with this person doing that, right? Because some people do get very attached to their canon. So I think that if we say during that session 0, hey, this person wants to try this, here's our little explanation as to how it works, then we let them do it.
It's also just, if any of my players are listening, y'all are level 5. You're not having a pet rancor. I'll let you have a pet, not a pet rancor.
My dogs
no.
are not happy about these pet answers. They keep barking at me constantly. Although I don't think they like rancors. Okay, so I have 2 questions in a row. I'm going to ask both of them, and you reply to either one or both of them. A player arrives without having watched or read any of the source material. What's your process for onboarding them? And a player arrives with extensive and deep knowledge of the source material. What's your process for onboarding them into your game?
Oh man. All right. So for the player who doesn't know anything, so if I'm running like a Blade Runner game, I'm like, all right, well, so this is sort of like it's a very film noir game. It's hard-boiled detective mystery, but there's robots. And just sort of like find some touchstone that we have in common and use that to then expand on, okay, this is what the game about. It's like this other thing that you're familiar with. Here's how it's different. Here's how it's unique. With the player who has extensive knowledge, ideally, they're cool enough to just go with it, where I'm like, yeah, so I'm gonna break canon in this way and do this thing because I think that's cool. And then like, oh yeah, cool. Rather than like, okay, but on page 452 of this book, it says like, no, just be a polite player. That's all.
Right.
We're not here to be like a 100% accurate canon simulation. We're just here to tell a story in the universe, and sometimes we change things.
Well, like for like I have a player that has like very much not a lot of knowledge about the setting. It's definitely just like the biggest thing is like, hey, here's how things work. This is sci-fi, space opera, science fantasy. There's technology. It's futuristic. There's spaceships, but everything done is done on a VHS tape. One of my players is very young. I had to explain what a VHS tape was.
We shouldn't be
and it's
laughing
like,
at that.
I'm gonna go walk into the ocean now, pardon me.
that's how I felt. But yeah, it's like it's very much like it's still like old modem looking. Everything is like very blocky and clunky, but we've like mastered interdimensional, not interdimensional, but inter like stellar travel and laser swords. Um and so like here's kind of like the idea that you want. Like there's like magic sort of kind of, but there's also like actual magic sort of kind of. And here's how you could do with it. Like the reality is stranger than fiction in this setting. Um, for the extensive knowledge person, it's like, hey, the things you know from like here to here, not relevant. Like, poof, out of your memory. The things you know from here to here, most of it is going to be different, or most of it's going to be the same. Um, just like kind of like to establish like if you were playing something in the Old Republic in Star Wars, it was like, hey, X, Y, or Z are going to be here, but like X or Y or Z hasn't happened yet. It just getting everyone on the same page in whatever way you can. Sometimes it's like parsing down on, sometimes it's over explaining.
I think with both types of players, I would start off by with a conversation that says, all right, what types of stories do you like to tell? What type of games do you like to play? What type of characters do you like to embrace and play? And have that conversation start there. Then we build upon, all right, well, here are the general rules of the IP. And maybe that would be enough for the person that doesn't know anything to be like, oh yeah, I like playing a bard maybe I could be someone that's a singer on the starship. And that would be enough to start moving the story forward for them. Whereas the people that might know a lot more than even I do about the IP, it would become, all right, so how can we tell the type of stories that you like within what you know? And we're not going to get to everything, because it's, so much time worth of it, like 800 episodes of television or whatever. And then go from there. Like, okay, can we focus in on this part of what you know and really embellish this with your character?
Nice. Yeah, those are good. All of those are great answers. It is such a different thing when they come with no or a lot of knowledge, but really everyone's trying to get to the same point, same place anyway as a GM. So when you're casting for your games within these types of settings, what are you looking for in your players outside of just general interest in playing in your game? Or is that enough? Is that all you look for?
I mean, so when I present a game to my players and I say, here's what I want the game to be about, here's the themes I want to explore, I would like them to be enthusiastic about that. And that's really all I need, because as long as they're enthusiastic about the story, I feel like everything else will just sort of fall into place naturally.
Like an example I thought of when I was working on these questions was like, do you look for, in Star Trek, for instance, do you look for players that have sort of an interest that is sort of like, that have scientific inquiry as a real life trait? Like, does that matter? Are there things that matter?
I think as long as they enjoy playing a character who has that sense of inquiry.
Yeah, I think for me, whenever I do a session 0, it always starts with like 15 to 20 minutes of everyone just chatting. And as a GM, you can get a lot of information just watching the players chat, because they might not know each other, right? That's a big thing, especially when we play digitally these days. I think chemistry among your players is very, very important to the health of the game. And I really think that in 15 to 20 minutes, just letting people chat and catch up and laugh and have a good time, that's going to tell you a lot about what type of chemistry there is among the players. Especially so if you're going to be trying to add some production value to it and stream and things like that. And if you're playing in person, I think that, obviously the session 0 tells a lot, but I think that you can also find 1 or 2 people that maybe aren't as familiar with the other people who are playing or aren't as outgoing, that can learn how to role play from the other players at the table.
Yeah, I mean, everything that y'all said, as well. One big thing is emphasis on being excited about the story that you're trying to tell, and not just like the setting that you're playing it in. Because like just going back to Star Wars, if I was like, okay, we're gonna be playing a Star Wars game, and then like if for whatever reason wasn't communicated well enough, I was like, oh, I thought this was gonna be like everyone has lightsabers. We're like going to like fight like the bad Sith, light and darkness, etc. And it's like, well, it's not exactly what we're going for, um, and like just figuring that out, because you could love a setting but not love what the people are doing with it. That's true just for the media, the IP itself, not naming like names.
I don't want to play in the first 3 movies.
No, but I want to play in the first 3 movies. I just don't want the writing from the first 3 movies.
I can so easily see that being the arguments, like that separation of favorites.
Exactly.
So what do you, okay, in the systems you run, what are some of the things that you love about the way the system works? Things that you look at and you go, wow, they nailed that so well. Not only is it a great system, because I'm assuming you're running systems you like, but they did something that really makes the system nail it for setting, like makes it feel through rules like it's perfect for the setting.
So I sort of mentioned this earlier, but the way for you to procedurally generate a mystery in the back of the Blade Runner book, it's really, really good. You still have to do some of the, not some Easter, but it gives you what the core mystery is, what the twist is, where the final confrontation will happen. And just as prompts, they're incredibly useful to have.
Yeah.
For the system we're doing for Unwavering Forest is Pathfinder 2E, because specifically the story we wanted to tell, I wanted the players to feel powerful, to feel like that you're not just like a dude, just a guy on the street, which I think Pathfinder is very explicitly like well done at that.
Yeah, and just so that everyone understands, it's not Starfinder.
No,
it's
no.
Pathfinder being used to run Star Wars.
Yeah, specifically second edition. I love Pathfinder second edition.
Yeah.
Not a huge fan of the first edition, which is why like I deviated from using Starfinder first edition. Starfinder second edition could not come fast enough. But yeah, and that's why I really fell in love with that, and also just like the flexibility we have. Like we homebrew a lot, but not a lot, not as much as you think. We're able to use like a lot of the main classes, and we just like, oh, we're just flavoring this. But like going to the official Star Wars Fantasy Flight System, um, they're really good at playing the very specific class, our playbook, our style that they have in the book. One mechanic I love that I'm kind of like stole from them is like the fate dice that Fantasy Flight has. Really giving like this extra um, roles that you could do to like because the force works in mysterious ways or et cetera, et cetera. And it really adds an extra touch, which is like really fun.
So I've got a couple of things about Star Trek Adventures that I think is really, really awesome. The first part, it's the 2d20 system. So you're combining two sets of stats together, creating a target number. You roll 2d20 and you want to roll at or below the number. That's a success. It's awesome because you can roll low. One bank of stats on your character are the 6 disciplines of Starfleet. So you have, you have command, you have con, you have medicine, you have science, you have engineering, and you have security. So it's really cool that your stats kind of show where you are within that discipline. I like that a lot. The second thing that, and even Nathan Dowdell will point to Star Trek Adventures about this mechanic that he created, because he had it in the old 2D20 games like Conan and Infinity and all those type of games, but nobody ever used it. And that's the assist mechanic, because Star Trek is all about working together to solve problems, right? So if reasonably other characters could be, on a computer or helping in some way, they get to roll dice as well when you are attempting your tasks. So what, obviously if you're trying to like hack into a little control panel that's super small, they're not going to be able to help you. But if you are, all trying to put out a fire somewhere, and you're running in, they're going to try to assist you. I really, really, really like that assist mechanic a lot. It's great for storytelling.
Yeah, and I love that it lends to what Star Trek stories are about. I mean, that's exactly what I was looking for. Like, what are some of the characteristics that the system does to assist the setting, which some games do better than others. So with with a setting that it has cultural cachet, is well known, people know what it is, does that ease your need for world building and research and game prep? Or does it actually make it does it not ease it? Does it make it harder where you have to do more because you're writing around the periphery of what's actually there? Like, I can imagine for a one shot, it'd be super easy because so much is there. But for a longer campaign, it may be a lot of effort to write around the edges of what's already there, because then you have to do all this research again.
I think it's about the same amount of effort, just you're spending it on different things. So if it's yeah, so my two Blade Runners, they're posted up here in this building from the little animated show. I at the very least need to put in the work to figure out how I'm going to describe that and convey that sense of place to them, which is about the same amount of effort, at least to me, as making up a place for them to live from just whole cloth.
I think it's about the same amount of work. The bane of my existence was trying to figure out how calendars work in Star Wars. it's just, did you know the calendar starts over every time there's a major event? So like 19 BBY is 19 before the Battle of Yavin. And it's like that is like inane. It took me so long. Like one of my best friends, he's like my Star Wars guru. He knows everything about Star Wars. So we were sitting at a bar talking about this, like, what do you mean that's how it works? What do you mean that's how it works? It just like stuff like that. You'll find these little things where you think it should be so simple. It's not. It's not. So it's about the equal amount of work.
Yeah, I mean, I think here's the awesome part about running Star Trek is space is big, right? And you can tell a story in the heart of the Federation that follows a lot of rules that you kind of have to take into consideration as you are forming your story. But you can also be a vessel that's out on the edge of the galaxy that's never been explored before. And I really like that type of campaign because then I can create my own stuff with the guiding rules of Star Trek. And that is always a lot of fun. One of the Star Trek games I'm playing in right now, the one that I play by post on Discord, we're in another galaxy. So we're meeting a whole bunch of new people and new civilizations, trying to uphold what Starfleet and the Federation believe in, but we're in a whole new galaxy, and people are like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, preparation. I think it's not as hard as you think. In fact, I actually find it a little bit easier to plan for this IP because I know the expectations. I know like the big idea of Star Trek. Now I make that my own.
Yeah. So when you have players come from popular systems, do they tend to melt into the setting or push against the setting's restrictions?
I think it depends on the player, because some players, they do play in that style of, I'm gonna see how far I can go until the GM tells me no. And then the GM, okay, they said no, that's fine, I know where the boundary is. And then other players just start out more constrained. And I don't think either one is necessarily wrong, as long as they're still polite about it.
Again, yeah, I think it just depends. I think it depends on the system, whether you're paying a more rules light or like a even more crunchier system. I think Pathfinder 2e, not as crunchy as you think. There's just an overwhelming amount of options, which could be like the part that a lot of people just like don't jive with, which is like super understandable. That's why like half of our casts are like Pathfinder sickos, and so we help the other half of our cast figure stuff out. But I even could go to like I love like rules lights game or even like stuff like belonging outside belonging, even PBTA, which like are more streamlined for a specific like playbooks when PBTA are like you're playing this kind of character. It can feel restricting, but I just kind of like working with like, hey, we could do this or we could like mix and match, etc. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. And so like unless it gets to the point like, hey, I just don't think this game is like for you. And that's not like it's not like to be rude about it. Just like sometimes the game's not for a person.
Again, I'm going to come back to the session zero discussion, right? How willing are we to do this, right? How much flexibility do we want within what we're told the IP is, right? And I'll tell my players right off the bat, I'm like, anything that's in one of the books that belongs to this game is merely a suggestion or a tool. We can choose what we want to use. We can choose what we don't want to use. And just as long as we're all on the same page with that, I try to make sure that that happens before we even start playing.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Almost all big problems like that can be solved with a good session zero. And I think combined with good casting that asks questions to identify players that fit your style of running, I think that's a benefit also. So can the three of you co-GM a game where the crew of the Starship Voyager is searching for replicants on Coruscant? Fans want to know.
Easy. LA is in
Sure.
Coruscant now. Done.
I'll just put my players on a spaceship. You're going to the colonies. You get lost. Congratulations, you fall through a wormhole, and now you're in a galaxy far, far away.
But still somehow really looks like LA.
Well, part of it looks like Arizona, maybe.
Arizona.
Deserty, a lot of planets.
No
California.
But you've got the San Diego trash mesa. Sorry,
Yeah.
Dustin.
No, you're so fair. One of our casts, they're playing a trash person on a Coruscant. I'm not being facetious. That's their profession.
Speaking of, maybe Wall-E should be one of those IPs that should turn into a game.
Wall-E is actually post Blade Runner.
Yes, it's the future.
Yeah, I could see that.
Hey, one of the roles that you can play in Sentience, the role-playing game, is a recycling bot.
Let's go.
I would like to see a game in which you play essentially the singularity is happening or has just happened, and then players get to explore like how they're gonna cope and adapt to that.
Yeah. Before getting
Isn't there,
stretched
like-
out into infinity, though.
Isn't there like that world-ending game that's like literally what it's called? Like it's like
All Out?
like no, it's called world-ending game. Like it's like you're playing it's like a system design like, hey, the world is ending in like a week. So, and you go through playing like that. It's like meant to be like an add-on to games where like you're experiencing this situation and then you get to actually role play it out.
10 Candles Sci-Fi Edition.
Yeah, I was about to bring up 10 Candles.
All right.
Look, give me a chance. I'll put mechs into anything.
10 power cells. Done.
The last two questions, and they're really advice questions. So what advice would you give someone either getting ready to run an IP game with a lot of cultural reach or cachet? And what advice would you give someone wanting to play in a game like that?
My advice would be the same in both cases. I would advise the player if they haven't already, and even if they have, just refresh yourself watch the movie, the TV show, read the book, whatever it's based on, and then figure out what the story is about. So like Dune is it's about like cultural oppression and environmentalism, whereas like a more like Star Wars is more about like resisting fascism and various permutations. And so once you can pull those themes out, once you figure out what the story is about, you know what you want to make your campaign. You want to make it about those same themes. And then if you're a player, you want to make a character created to explore those themes.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've been saying this whole like stream is that like get into the setting, but still like don't focus on the story that they're telling, focus on the story that you want to tell. And you just happen to have this backdrop of whatever system or setting you're playing in. And like as far as like playing in the game, just find like-minded people that want to like play the same story. If you find a good group, you're gonna like be able to play whatever with them. Just like, hey, I want to do um this story where we are like doing something at the end of Rogue One. You could play Going Rogue 2E and have a great time with that. It's just Star Wars with the files, the numbers filed off, but you could also just make it Star Wars. It's easy enough to do that. But yeah, just I think like you said, Rachel, both things just I think for both, just focus on the story that you want to tell and not try to recreate the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, I've got two things that I would say, and one of them builds off what Dusty just was talking about. Create your character with open threads for the GM to pull on, and and tie one of two of those threads to canon if you'd like. And as the GM, make sure that you know that those threads exist and tug on them, right? Because again, this is co-storytelling. You have with those threads, you kind of have an understanding of a story that your players want to tell. So make sure that that happens first and foremost. The second thing is keep in mind you don't know everything about the IP. You'll always run into someone that knows more. So be modest in your interpretation. Be honest with your players. If somebody asks a question about the IP that you can't answer, just be honest about it. Like, here's how I'm going to run it, right? So that we can focus on our story.
Yeah, all good advice. I don't know if I rarely run heavy IP. Like last one was Tales from the Loop. I do think it's important for people to get an understanding of what the setting means, and that's what you were talking about, Rachel. Was not necessarily knowing the setting, but knowing what it means and stands for. Like that's the core of it anyway. I would also suggest for a player to maybe go watch at least one of the movies or shows, or you can't really ask them to go read a book before it starts because there may not be the time. But in a lot of these cases, there's a lot of ways to get just caught up enough that you get a feel for what it is. Spend a little time there. Star Trek is an overwhelming amount. Star Wars at this point, an overwhelming amount. Blade Runner, 2 movies and a book. They can get caught up pretty quick there.
There's an anime that's great bonus content.
Yeah, the Expanse TV show, book, a couple books. There are ways to get into those. I really think that most of the IP that turns into TTRPGs, there's easily accessible media to consume. Often free or very little if you already have Amazon Prime or whatever channels you have. All right, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to thank you in chat. You had great questions all night. That was fantastic. let's let everybody go around and say who they are and where they can be found, and some of your stuff that I'll drop in chat with the links again. Why don't we start with Al this time?
All right. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me, Scott. This has been great. A good discussion. I am Al Spader, GM_Admiral on almost every social media out there. Again, I write for Star Trek Adventures. I've also created the Sentience role-playing game. And by the end of Q1, I will have released my storybook role-playing game called Once Upon.
Nice. All right, Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel. I'm Stolen Fires pretty much everywhere on the internet. I have done some writing for RPGs. If you just look for Rachel H. Judd on DriveThruRPG, you'll find it. Community content, published works alike. About to start a project with Fallout. Really excited for that. Should be really. Yeah, you can come check me out over at twitch.tv/stolenfires. We have our Monday Fringeworthy game is on hiatus, but we do have Dune on Friday nights. And I am probably going to start up a mashup, speaking of science fiction, of essentially an isekai plus Warhammer. I'm going to make everybody create 1992 space astronauts. They board the ship, and then I'm going to throw them through a wormhole. Congrats, it's the Horus Heresy. Survive.
Awesome. All right, Dusty.
Hi, I'm Dusty. You can find me all along the internet at Dusty Hill. Basically everywhere that I have an account on. Also, producer and player of Goblins and Gays. Our newest series, Butter May I, is an alien game. Things start off the wall and it's only going from there. First episode just dropped. It's going to be dropping Monday on our Patreon, Wednesdays main feed for the next like 9 weeks, something like that. And also An Unwavering Force, a Star Wars story. If you found any of those things I was talking about this stream entertaining, that's almost exclusively from our show. So you can find that at Unwavering Force on Twitter, and Unwavering Force on your podcatchers. We have like episodes released bi-weekly on the weekends. It's heavily produced, so we take a long time to edit it. So usually Saturday morning, if not Sunday morning, maybe Sunday afternoon. It's like an 8-hour process, but it's good stuff. We played like horror and on there. We do stuff like we played a story with like origin story with the kids. It's very sad. Maybe the saddest things I've ever recorded. Check it out.
People in TTRPGs, they're totally okay with sad usually. I'm Scott. This is ZealZaddy. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Next week, we're going to be doing our first Story Talk one-on-one, which is going to be a one-on-one interview with Caleb Hewitt, one of the creators of the Triangle Agency, which I'm super excited for. I cannot wait to have that sit down. I loved everything I saw in the Kickstarter and a little bit previous to that. So I look forward to seeing you all there next week. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you in a week.